Hello, Beth. Welcome to Off the Top. So, the rules are kind of simple. I'm going to ask you questions, and hence the name Off the Top. Think of these questions off the top of your head. Okay, let's go. What is your idea of perfect happiness?
In bed with my dogs on a stormy night or above tree line watching pika.
Which living person do you admire?
Oof. Boy, that's a tough one. Yvonne Chouinard or Bono?
Which words or phrases do you most overuse?
That's interesting.
If you were to die and come back as a person or a thing, what would it be?
Oh, a marmot, definitely. They hibernate 8 months of the year, and the 3 months they're out, they just lay on rocks in the sun.
What do you regard as the lowest depth of misery?
Oh, anything with big crowds. I just don't like big crowds. Not being able to get away from people.
What do you most value in your friends?
Honesty.
What profession other than your own would you not like to attempt?
Anything to do with math.
What or who is the greatest love of your life?
Ooh. I gotta go with, two. P22 definitely was a great love of my life. And my dog Dante that just passed at 12. I have 5 dogs. We have lots of dogs. You have that one dog. He was it. So I've lost 2 great animal loves of my life this year. It's been really tough.
What turns you on spiritually or emotionally?
I think the wild world. I love exploring it, being curious about it. It brings me great peace and joy. It brings me intellectual curiosity. So, wild animals or animals, I think is what that is.
All right, welcome. That was Marley having a little fun with our guest, Beth Pratt. This is part 2 of a 2-part interview. If you missed part 1, I would encourage you to go back and have a listen to that. If you are here in anticipation of our continued conversation with Beth Pratt, well then, let's get to it. This is the Emerging World Project podcast. What are you doing here? I'm Addison Brown. Today, I'm delighted to introduce you to an exceptional guest who has dedicated her life to making a positive impact on our planet, Beth Pratt. Beth is an acclaimed author, conservationist, and advocate. She is a true force of nature, channeling her passion for wildlife and the environment into transformative action. As the California Regional Executive Director for the National Wildlife Federation, she has led groundbreaking initiatives and tirelessly championed the cause of conservation. Her relentless commitment to protecting our natural world has earned her well-deserved recognition and respect among her peers. Beyond her impressive role at the National Wildlife Federation, Beth is an accomplished author who has captured hearts and minds through her writing. Her work not only educates and inspires readers, but also shines a light on the urgent need to preserve and restore our fragile ecosystems. From the pages of her books, she paints vivid pictures of our natural wonders, urging us to embrace a sense of stewardship and forge a harmonious relationship with the earth. Beth Pratt's advocacy extends far beyond the written word. Through her engaging presentations and impassioned speeches, she sparks a deep sense of connection between people and nature. Her ability to communicate complex environmental issues in a relatable and accessible manner has empowered countless individuals to join the fight for a sustainable future. In today's conversation, we'll have the privilege of delving into Beth's remarkable journey. We'll explore the formative experiences that awakened her love for wildlife, delve into the challenges facing our planet, and discover the innovative solutions she champions. In this time when the need for environmental stewardship has never been more pressing, Beth's work serves as a beacon of hope and inspiration. Through her writing, conservation efforts, and advocacy work, she continues to galvanize individuals to take action, reminding us all of our responsibility to safeguard the planet for future generations. Brace yourself for a thought-provoking discussion as we explore Beth Pratt's vision for a world where nature thrives and humanity and wildlife coexist in harmony. On more practical, pragmatic terms.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I loved. Did you watch? Not to get too far down this rabbit hole, but I was watch. I love The Last of Us, just because they took a um, a fungus that exists already in nature and sort of extrapolated that into a what if, which is not
Yes.
all that implausible, actually, if the
Yes.
climate changes enough to shift and this could jump to humans, which as we're seeing with pandemics, right? It's just one more.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I just, I love that imagining, but also, again, the it's always interesting to me on these end of world movies I love is how humans respond. And that one was interesting because there were so many different approaches to it, right? You had these militarized zones, you had one of the places, I think it was Jackson Hole, where it seemed to be almost this happy society that was based on fairness. And so everybody responds differently to these stressors, maybe, for lack of a better word. And to me it's always so interesting, the human response to threat or change is just
Right.
very different.
It is. And I think we'll always have that. That's why I said through-topia, right? Like
Yeah,
there are plentiful dystopian films, right? Like we
yeah,
could just, that's all we make. So
yeah,
this place is, we are at a place where we have to push through and see what that other imagining is that we're not even imagining. I haven't
yeah.
been able to get there. And I
Me
wonder,
neither.
it often is this as minute as fear, right?
Yeah,
So, a deeply, what I feel for me was a deeply programmed fear early on that I had to break through. And not just fear of big things, but just safety, just
yeah,
fear of, or fear of not being here, right? Not so much fear of death, but fear of actually not being here. Like, okay, what is that?
yeah,
Like, what is that? And so going down that path to explore it has helped me look at or push the boundary of my own imagination of what this Throughtopia could look like, even though I don't know that I'll see it. But we will see the completion of the Wallace Annenberg Wildlife Crossing, won't we?
yes, I know. It's so, I mean, to me that's on the spectrum of what we're getting at, right? That, listen,
Mhm.
I mean, it is, we are not going back to the old timey days when it's
Mhm.
just nature, right? I mean, even, as much as I'd love it, it ain't happening. So that's the other thing I think we have to reckon with is, what is this going to look like? How can we make both work, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm working on this book, Yosemite Wildlife. Just really excited, because it's been a long haul working on it, and I'm one chapter away from finishing. It'll be out next year, but
Congratulations.
yeah, oh, it's very exciting. It's the book I've always wanted to write. I'm very
I
excited.
love
But
that.
I was talking with Roland Knapp, who's a conservation hero of mine, and he was, again, the science raised the alarm bell on the mountain yellow-legged frogs in the Sierra, but also came up with the solution, which, at first, obviously, the trout introduction, is what spelled their doom, and then you get the chytrid fungus, which takes over. And even with these mountain yellow-legged frogs, literally almost checking out, almost in my lifetime, almost going extinct. There's some hope now. And he said to me, which he's right, is like, listen, we're never going to be back to what it was when they were literally ruling the Sierra.
Right.
You could even walk in some places. And then again, this is in my lifetime, but that's okay. We're
Right.
going to get, it's better than them not being there. And I think like the Wallace-Annenberg Wildlife Crossing to me shows that you can still have a 10-lane freeway with 400,000 cars a day, and you can still have wildlife. To
Right.
me, that commuters will be driving under the structure while the mountain lion will be moving on top shows that, back to what we were talking about, I don't quite know this new answer, but it's on that spectrum, right? That it's something we
Absolutely.
haven't thought of yet, right?
Exactly. It's
It
not
is
here yet.
something,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I think that is a good, the Wallace-Annenberg Crossing is a good example of that. And so we need to be
Right.
thinking more like that. It's no longer, it's not this binary either or. It's how can we look at nature together? I think the Japanese are on this too, although I spent 6 weeks in Japan and, again, imperfectly, like we all are. I mean, I'm not picking on them because we all have terribly complex relationships with nature where we do some good and we do, but, they don't see nature as separate. And they don't have really religion, but Shintoism is that connection to nature. And I loved, you see all these tree crutches over there and their national parks are so different from ours, and that a city could be a national park, right? It's sort of, and of course, problematically, they, still hunt whales and things like that. They have the indigenous cultures, this sort of, you don't even call it religion. It's just innate in them, this connection to, the natural world in an almost spiritual way. And so that's where, like, how do we get back to that, right? That nature is everywhere. I mean, just because you're in a city, we've been taught that wasn't nature, but that's not true. It is.
Right.
So we're getting
Right.
there. I think the Wallace-Annenberg Wildlife Crossing is a good example of that, and things that inspire. I think people letting, that P22 could live under the Hollywood sign is another great example of that. I think the wildlife in some respects are our best teachers. They don't have a problem with it. I mean, P22 wasn't sitting in Griffith Park longing to be in Yosemite. He just wanted to live, and
Right.
he
Right.
adapted.
He
It's
just
us
found
who,
himself there.
yeah,
Right.
I mean, they're adapting to our wild spaces, coyotes, bobcats, you name it. It's us who have the hangups.
Right. And it has to do with that. I think, again, that sort of limited and sort of micro, the way we walk around in our world, in this sort of micro existence, right? It's
Yes.
like, maybe I know the neighbor and maybe two neighbors, and maybe I think I might be able to identify one of those trees. But I do think that the more that we know about nature, the variety, the biodiversity of it, the less we can be so human centric in everything that we do.
Yes, I agree. And
And
I mean, and the more we know about ourselves, I mean, I just keep coming back
mhm,
to, we are nature. We may put ourselves,
right,
we may think ourselves immune to natural laws, but we're not. I mean, I think
right,
California being at the ground zero of climate change, whether it be fire or flooding, we can't control this stuff. And I think that it is our hubris that allows us to think we could. I mean, just this year in California, or even where I live, we
mm,
had last year the 114 degrees at my house. That's never
mhm,
happened in 2,000 years. I
mhm,
mean,
mhm,
and then you run into this winter where I had 3 feet of snow at my elevation, which is unheard of. Again, it probably hasn't happened since the last ice age. And it had real human impacts. I was trapped in my house for 10 days, no power,
mhm,
couldn't get out. Now I was
mhm,
okay. I have a
mhm.
wood stove, I had food, but some people weren't. And, it's only going to get worse. And so I think, again, not to doomsay, but I think it is that disconnection from the natural world and not knowing our neighbors and thinking, oh, yeah, the frogs can go extinct. It doesn't impact us. Well, it sure does.
Right,
It sure does.
right.
Hmm.
Every little element. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, just I wanted to talk about rodenticides, but I'm gonna move us into another direction.
sure.
Although that might come up in terms of advocating for people to connect with nature, which would be wanting people to look at how they're living differently And so my question to you is, what kinds of actions or steps can individuals, or would you suggest individuals take in their daily lives to foster a stronger bond with our
Yeah.
natural world?
I think, first of all, I think the pandemic, not that there was anything good about it. But what I really was encouraged by during the pandemic is people couldn't go anywhere and they really just got to know their wild neighbors. I love, the people building picnic tables for squirrels. And I mean, it
Like,
was,
that's so
and I,
cool.
yeah, it was awesome. And I remember this cycling, blogger. He wasn't much interested in the natural, but he called me up. He's like, he wanted to ask. He'd been hearing all this bird song, and he's like, "Did they come back?" Or I'm like, "No, it's always been there. You just haven't been able to hear it." And I think for a lot of people, whether it be sunsets, even me who lives rurally and gets good sunsets, I couldn't believe the sunsets we were getting during the pandemic. I think a lot of people realized what they had been missing and what we had lost. And so I think it gets back to the number one thing you can do is just, meet your wild neighbors. Even if you
Mhm.
just have an apartment balcony, put out a bird bath, put out a hanging plant, and start being curious about what is around you. And I think that
Mhm.
just then leads to knowledge, which leads to love, which leads to, then taking action. A love of a mountain lion got the world's largest $100 million wildlife
Right.
crossing built. So, and I've seen it time and again. The love of bears when I worked in Yosemite, really changed how the bear management program was approached there. The love of frogs, has led to people supporting. There was one frog that the scientists put up. He was the last of his kind, and they wanted to try to find him a mate. They named him Romero, and people's love of frogs got that guy a mate.
Mhm.
So time and again, we've seen what love can do, and obviously towards people as well. So I think meeting your wild neighbors, becoming curious is one, but also understanding your impacts and
Mm.
shift when you can. Rodenticides being a good example. Don't use them. I mean, these poisons, herbicides, they have an inordinate impact in the natural world. Recreation is another big rant of mine
Mhm.
these days, and we're just,
Mhm.
there has to be limits. We tend to
Mhm.
think driving is bad, and I think everybody gets that and why we're building wildlife crossings. But mountain biking down trails certain times of years can be terrible. And I have a mountain bike. I
Mhm.
like it, but we just seem to be still not realizing the impact of unlimited recreation.
Mhm.
And I think that's something we have to reckon to. There's a trail near me that wanted to expand, and it was a really important riparian corridor. Right now, it was sort of this more walking use trail, and they started encouraging mountain biking and
Oh, wow.
much more use without really thinking through it. And of course, it's an important newt migration path. It's an important
Mm.
riparian corridor, and just our mere human presence can deter animals from getting to the food and shelter and water they need anywhere, not just on this trail. And I think this whole notion of connectivity, I've learned so much about that in
Mhm.
working on the crossing. Swimming in ponds certain time of year can disrupt tadpoles moving back and forth to where they need to be, to say nothing of shipping lanes disrupting whale migrations. So, listen, it's not that we can't be human. It's not that we
Mhm.
can't do things we need, but I think understanding more our impact can help us minimize those impacts. First, do no
Mhm.
harm is what I keep coming back to. And although I'm a
Mhm.
big advocate of bringing green space back to cities, at this point, I don't want to give up 1 square inch of undeveloped land. I mean,
Mhm.
people saying we have to
Mhm.
compromise. Well, I think we have compromised, and the natural world has compromised enough. So,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
simple things like if you put a fence up, well, maybe look at, can like a fox get through it so that they can go through your yard? Is it
Right.
forcing animals onto
Right.
the streets? So I think just reckoning with our impacts and trying to minimize those wherever we can is where I'm at these days on how to make a difference.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I think that also, dovetails with this need to slow down.
Yes.
Our
Yeah, slow
incessant,
down could be, it's such an easy thing.
such an
Slow
easy
down,
thing. Just
slow
slow
down,
down.
slow down.
Just
It gives you better reaction time, and you can
Mhm.
you can
Mm-hmm.
then avoid some collisions with wildlife. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this our pursuit of our need to fulfill certain desires to feel better about ourselves. Now I'm going
yeah,
psychological here, but I fall in the realm of wanting to climb, Kilimanjaro, or go on extensive hikes. And I understand that humans have always wanted to move around, but I wonder again about how much of that is going to be necessary, or is even necessary, for us to feel some sense of belonging and content and joy in the what's already here, what we've already built in this world,
that's a
right?
great point. I definitely have seen, for me, a transition has gotten older. I just love my sense of place. I love
Yeah.
where I live. I almost never want
Yeah.
to leave it these days, even though I have to.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I mean, it's not, I mean, traveling is also beneficial, but what we need is here. And
Mhm. Mhm.
I think paying more attention to our surroundings can bring great joy, whether you're traveling or not. I mean,
Right.
I hate flying, not because I'm scared. It's just such a hassle. But what always strikes me when I'm flying, and I always get a window seat, is how everybody else on the plane has closed their window and they're watching movies or on their computer. And I'm like, my God, like all the entertainment you need is outside the window.
It's
Like
crazy, right?
yeah, how have we gotten now? Don't get me wrong, I enjoy a good movie and and a good TV series, but you're on a plane 30,000 feet above the earth, and I can't imagine a more wondrous thing to look at for a few
I
hours than. So yeah,
totally agree.
why do we need these distractions when all we need is really, for the most part, the natural world to bring us that joy and satisfaction? um I don't know. Yeah, it is, again, I think, um something very human, that has gotten out of balance. Again,
Mhm.
I love
Mhm.
movies, but and I love a lot of the things of the modern world. I'm glad we have vaccines. I'm
Mhm.
glad that I can fly and see my friends 3,000 miles away. Where, you know, even 50, 100 years ago, if you moved away, you weren't seeing your. So there's a lot I love about the modern world, but how do we balance that with something we've lost, which is a connection to what is so special and joyful on this planet? I think it's like we overcomplicate it. I mean, there's nothing more amazing to
Absolutely.
me than watching a sunset or bats come out, and so why is that not fulfilling something in us that it should? I don't know the answer, but yeah,
Right.
it is really
Right.
interesting.
I think the neuroscientists are really starting to delve into this,
Hmm.
dopamine, over dopamine. It's like what is the expression I heard? It's like we're a cactus in the forest.
Uh,
Like we
yeah.
just can't get enough.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so that somehow biologically, neurologically, that is what's happening. It's just, it doesn't last long. It's never enough.
Yeah.
So
It's true. Yeah. And
something to
it's
think about. I had a conversation with a relative of mine, and I hope he doesn't listen to this podcast. Um, he we were having lunch, and he is very stoic, and he's a lawyer, and so I got that right. And I said, can you tell me just a little bit? He was in Los Angeles. I said, can you tell me what you're working on? He goes, I can't, you're going to hate me. I said, really? He goes, yeah, I just can't. I go, please, just a little bit. He says, think about the fires and what is it, Pacific, PG&E, or one of the electric companies, and the lawsuit, and think about what side I'm working for.
oh, gotcha. Yeah.
And I just said, and I asked him, I said, okay, I'm not gonna have that conversation with you, but I want to have this conversation about what is enough. Because I understand what's pushing you is more money, a bigger house, more cars, more ability to travel to Abu Dhabi or wherever you want to go. I get that. But are you asking yourself what is enough? And just start to ask yourself, what's enough? Like, how big does your house need to be?
Right.
How many cars do you think you need to drive? That's not to say, because I know his answer would be, well, you did it. And it's true. Like, I had to go through the phase of
Right.
oversaturating my desires. So anyway, I just felt like that was for somebody that was going out into the world to work in the world and make his place in the world, a good question, a good place for him to start about how much he thinks he needs to
I think that is
be in the world.
that's the heart of the issue, is how much is enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it does, again, it doesn't have to be all or nothing, right? But
Right, right,
I think, one
right,
thing like the supply chain issues we have these days really hits me is, we don't need, 150 different
right.
kinds of tea to be in stock every second, right? I mean, I remember early on being like, oh my God, my favorite thing isn't there. And then it started hitting me. Well, my God, we have gotten to a level of what is enough that is so beyond the pale that even I
Mm-hmm.
needed, a gut check on, that, yeah, how much is enough? How much is enough? And I think what we're also dealing with is problems of scale, which is, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'll give a really minor example of this. Rock stacking, hugely impactful.
Mm.
Um, National parks are warning it can impact wildlife. It can change waterways. Yeah, if
Mm.
one person does it, who cares? But that never happens anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
As our
Mm-hmm.
population keeps exponentially growing, what was okay 50 years ago doesn't work, right? I mean, like,
Right.
national parks are a great example. I'm a big proponent now of putting visitor limits on it. Not having equal opportunity for access, but not unlimited access, because we're just seeing resource damage. And yeah, when the parks were at 1 million visitors, or depending on the park, you didn't see these impacts, right? But
Mm.
it is a matter of scale now, right? That
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that we're grappling with as well. And that's where, yeah, what is enough? We may not be able to do things, whether it be buying our specialty tea and having that in stock all the time, or visiting our favorite park the way we used to. Yeah, is that too bad? Sure. But on the other hand, it is where we're at. I think we need to reckon with that what is enough? Yeah. What is enough?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I I wonder, yeah, I think that we'll end up being doing less, but we'll find some sort of peace in that. I don't know.
I have never been happier than when I hiked the Muir Trail. It
I was going to ask you what your favorite, if you had
It's
any
simple.
favorite
I mean, I'm
trails.
never these days, though. I have to say, I do like, just, I am in the high country. My happy place is above tree line when the pike are out, and
Mm-hmm.
there is a
Mm-hmm.
sense of peace that being out there. Everything's simplified, but I'd say through hiking gets you to a place that is probably more akin, again, to human origins. Right?
Mm-hmm.
We're meant to move, not sit at a computer. We're meant to, we evolved to be this sort of wanderer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to move a lot. We're people who walk. And yeah, the Muir Trail just, what's great about through hikes, not just the Muir Trail that I've done, is that your existence becomes so simplified. You walk,
Mm-hmm.
you eat, you drink,
Mm-hmm.
and you
Mm-hmm.
walk the next day, and you look at
Mm-hmm.
things, and it really gets you down to this simplified existence that is very stress free. You're also very reliant on yourself.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think it gets back to more akin to, going back thousands of years to what our human existence used to be like, which I'm not advocating for going back. Again, I like being able to see a Star Wars, but yeah, how do we get back to a balance of that, where we don't have a million friggin' choices every day, where we don't have,
Right.
we are at least a little more physical, right? I don't have a magic answer, but I do think there is a happiness in less choice than more.
I
Um,
agree. I liked it
and
when there were just like maybe two different tomatoes.
yeah, exactly. Or God, I grew up in a time where you had three different TV channels, and that was it. And I can't even keep up these days.
We might be dating ourselves here, but
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think the notion, listen, nature is very complex. So,
Mhm.
but on the other hand, I think a simplicity in existence is what nature is geared towards. And I think
Mm,
that's
mm.
where humans, again, getting back to what is it in humanness that is our, our where we went wrong. I think it's overcomplicating things. I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
probably our kryptonite, right? We just overthink things. If anything,
yeah,
perhaps our intellect is what is going to
yeah.
do us in, which is interesting.
Yeah, I've been feeling that way for a long time now. Almost was going to tell you that I'm going to be talking to Warren Dixon down the line, and we didn't
Oh,
get to.
good. My buddy Warren. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
and so I'm going to save any questions. I'll give them to him. That I was going to kind of combine the issues
Mhm.
with those communities that are
Well, again,
interconnected.
it is, and that's, I think, uh, someone just asked me about. We just did this talk on the crossing at that conference I told you about, and um, somebody stood up in the audience, and it was the ultimate compliment, even more than building the crossing, which was, my God, look at your, we brought like Warren and others who had helped us,
Mm-hmm.
and they said, we are just amazed. You have indigenous people and black and brown people, like,
Mm,
it's such an inclusive movement. Like, how did you do that? And it really threw me, right? Like,
mm-hmm,
I don't know how
mm-hmm,
to answer that question. And I think it is about listening and being inclusive, and knowing that you don't have all the answers. And Warren's such a piece of that. I met him, he was my driver the first year, and he started learning about P22, and he was a hip hop artist as well. And he said something so profound to me, and another person might have taken offense, right? I'm not holding
mm,
myself up as special, because it's really not. I've just kind of always been this way. But
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and you wonder why other people get afraid of difference. Me, it's like, wow, that's. But he talked about, he went to I pulled him into some event that first year I met him, and you had this person whose goats had been killed by a mountain lion, yet she was hosting this fundraiser to help the wildlife crossing, because she still loved mountain lions. And we get in the car, and he's like, that was so strange. He's like, you white people are crazy. He's like, how do we get you to love black people like mountain
mm,
lions? And I
mm-hmm,
was like,
mm-hmm,
wow, that's so powerful. And then,
mm-hmm,
we started
mm-hmm.
becoming friends, and he made the connection to P22 in such a way that we ended up, and you can talk to him about this, If I Was Wild challenge, which is really powerful, that to him and to the community of Watts, which I've spent a lot of time in now, it's an amazing community. They see P22 as analogous to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Warren said to me once that, I'm a black man who made it out just by luck of Watts. I mean, I could have, very easily not, because of the system was stacked against me. And he's
Mm,
like, P22 is the same way. The
mm,
system was stacked
mm,
against
mm.
him. Most mountain lions don't make it out. And so
Mhm.
for both of us, we need to change the system. And
Beautiful.
boy, that just made the
That is
connection
really powerful, yeah.
very
Yeah.
powerful. And yeah. So anyway, yeah, I'm glad you're talking to him. I love Warren. He's great.
Yeah, I think it's a great combination. I wanna backtrack and say and speak to the inclusiveness, too, that sometimes evaded my understanding of why I wouldn't do that anyway. So I talk to some people from all over the globe, and I forget. And it's not that I forget anybody else's story. I understand it, and I am empathetic, and I feel those stories. But as a human being, and as someone that is so immersed in understanding of my interconnectedness and my interrelationship with the natural world, I do often forget that it needs to happen,
Yeah.
right? That I have to make that happen. I have to make sure that
Mhm.
there's youth in these conversations, that
Right.
there's all types of people from all over the world in this. We can't go back from being global. We already are.
Right. Right.
But I have to be sensitive to uh, remember to do that, because it's easy to forget. Because it feels so good not to have to think that that's what the big problem is,
Right. Yep.
right?
Yeah, I think for, I mean, it's not unique to conservation or to even this campaign, but it's just, listening and empowering. I mean, I
Hmm,
feel like
hmm.
that is the key to, um, making people feel welcome, and realizing that your perspective is not the only one. I mean, it's now, sometimes you have to make some calls. Obviously, we're not going to, bring somebody in the movement who thinks it's okay to, slaughter wildlife. You know what I mean? There are
Right, right.
moral lines to be drawn, but on the other hand, people's different perspectives are so valuable and indeed enriching. And again, it makes us. I don't know. People like Warren have made me a better person.
Hmm, hmm. And that I love that connectivity, is broader than the way that we use it when we talk about conservation, right? We talk about
Exactly. Yeah.
connectivity is so important to nature. It is nature. Nature thrives on connectivity. That's that isolation that we're
Yes.
trying to that we've created, right, needs connectivity. And then you think about us within that too, us being humans, the connectivity, right? Like, of course, during the pandemic, we discovered that so profound, I think so profoundly, like,
Yes.
wow, like,
Yeah. And I think
holy moly.
it's a natural lesson. I mean, as someone who spends a lot of time out in nature observing wildlife, um, we tend to think of the natural world as sort of this cutthroats, where the predators prey on the prey all the time. And
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
but it's not. I mean, you
No.
see, the natural world is so connected where people, like the pika I study, the sort of landscape they live on, these talus slopes, you have multiple species interacting and helping each other from, like,
Mm-hmm.
if a raptor flies overhead, the ground squirrels, the pika, the marmots will
Mm-hmm.
all, and the birds will all sort of band together with these early warning systems, right? You also have predator and prey sometimes just working it out, right? They're not always out there on the hunt. And
Right,
you look at
right.
humpback whales who can be, they've seen them be altruistic. So I think, I think what, again, except for us humans, the natural world realizes how, connected they are. Um, and that it is a connected landscape of cooperation, even those who sometimes eat each other. So, yeah, I do. I'm with you. I've come to absolutely believe that as well, that this connectivity has a real, that we've lost that. And that's what the rest of nature the rest of the natural world hasn't, that we're a part of. And I do think that is a lesson for us. Again, not just in this very scientific definition of connectivity and restoring it by, like, building wildlife crossings, but our own psychological barrier, loss of connectivity to each other
Mm-hmm.
and to nature
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
is the key to everything. Absolutely with you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that helping out. And also, I lost it because you said it earlier, but now I've lost it. Okay. So, pardon me.
No worries.
Is there anything you would like me to ask you that I haven't asked you or you haven't been asked?
No, wonderful questions. It was great musing with you. I think it, almost everything we've talked about gets it. What I think is that we just need this connection to the wild world to be human,
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
for the human race to persist, which at this point I'm although I'm a hopeful person, not all that hopeful about it. But I do think if people can recognize that, we may be on the start to this new paradigm that we don't know what it is yet, um but we may be able to get there.
Yeah.
Bill Clinton said once, there's nothing wrong with America that what's right with America can't fix. And I almost believe
Mm-hmm.
that about us as humans. I think there's a lot wrong with us, all humans, but what is right with us could get us to that place of reconnection. I do believe that. We at least have the ability. We may not have the will or the desire, but we at least have the ability.
I absolutely agree. I think it's a if we look at all the problems, it's a whack-a-mole thing.
Yeah.
But if we look at, right, like we're just whacking, and that's fine. We don't need any new organizations per se. We can come together with the organizations that are already doing some monumental work, such as these
Hmm.
the wildlife crossing and things like that. But to that point, in terms of people looking at themselves and how they can be involved and do something, is to let themselves hear what nature is saying.
Right.
Just let yourself hear it. And I think that the curiosity of that will spark some sort of something within us. That's the imbrication that I think is what we've forgotten or what
Yeah.
we're not tapped into. But it's there. It is absolutely there. It also makes me think about this. After every extinction, things come back more beautiful, in more numbers, in more diversity. So if we are indeed on this path, then what is the beauty that we can come into, right? Like what is the new butterfly, right? Or the new, what is it? Like to think of it that way, right? So people talk about the best version of myself, right? So we can think about this new iteration as a better version of humanity.
Yeah,
And
exactly. I think, if we survive this, and I think the
if we
difference,
survive.
yeah, the difference between the last extinctions obviously is, we are the asteroid, right?
Hmm, hmm.
But yes, I agree. I mean, almost a psychological extinction for us. What what is the new? What does it mean to be human? That's new. I agree. I think there could be something very beautiful in that if we can get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shift in consciousness.
Yep.
Cores. The pull of remembering back to the center of time, back to the center, over and through and back by way of the middle again. Spiritual pathways, a promise delivered, a navel formed by the crisscrossing lines tracing the adventures, the joys, the frights, highlighting the heart, emphasizing the soul, memorializing the memory itself, tracing the adventures, the joys, the frights, the hopes, the fears, the lines of the stars, passages, ribbons, spiritual pathways, land constellations, a promise delivered, ribbons becoming bows, markings of sacred journeys traced over and over and over again. Corridors. Our way of stitching back together that which in our utterly confused clumsiness we have torn all the way apart. Overstitch, understitch, cross-stitch, backstitch. A way to repair, to apologize, to do over, to extend our young hand in remorse. Backstitch, overstitch, understitch, cross-stitch. A heartfelt, prayerful way to repair, a hopeful way to repair, of threading back together, of coming back together, of stitching back together that which we realize has always been meant to live as one. Carnivores. Paradoxical kin, the ones who with a single leap take the lives of those so very close to us in order to feed themselves, in order to feed their young. And also the guardians of life all around us, of our kin who eat plants, of the plant kin themselves, and even of the rich and fertile soil which births them. Keepers of balance, teachers of elegance. Puma, jaguar, panther, imposing reflections of our very own power, inviting us to retract, to fully retract our arms, to tread with the lightest of toes, keeping silence, holding reverence. A caress for the land with each step, a caress for the land with each purr. Puma, jaguar, panther, imposing reflections of our very own power, inviting us to know the fullness of our most unabashed roar. When it's time to be known, when it's time to be present, when it's time to offer nothing but our most preciously primal protection.
The Emerging World Project Studios recognizes that we occupy land in Los Angeles County originally and still inhabited and cared for by the Tongva, Tataviam, Serrano, Quiche, and Chumash peoples. We honor and pay respect to their elders and descendants, past, present, and emerging, as they continue their stewardship of the lands and waters in Los Angeles County. Thank you for tuning in to the Emerging World Project podcast. What are you doing here? We hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we enjoy creating it for you. If you found value in today's episode, we would love for you to take a moment to leave us a review on your preferred podcast platform. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but also helps others discover our show and join our community. So please don't be shy. Leave us a review and let us know what you think. We read every review, and your input truly means the world to us. To find out more about what the Emerging World Project is up to, head on over to emergingworldproject.org.